Hi, David.
Hi, Vanessa. How is
How
my audio, by the way?
What did you say?
How is my audio? Is it good?
It's great, actually.
Are you sure? Because there's a fan in front of me, so I'm trying to make
Oh,
it out.
I can't hear it, but can you hear mine?
I can hear you very well.
Can you hear my voice?
Yes, I can.
Can you hear the fan in front of me?
No, I can't.
Actually, turn on your video. Let's just know if I access it.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think
So can you? Everything is fine, Abby.
background.
Gonna make it comfortable as possible. But everything is fine, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. I'm letting people know.
How do I blur the background?
There you go. Hello. Hello. Hi, everyone. Oh, for joining. Okay. Gonna wait for like another 2 minutes. Hi guys, I'm gonna wait for like another 2 minutes and we'll start. Okay. So like 4 or 5. Hi guys. Thank you so much for being a part of this. This is a very close like it's not an elaborate event type situation. It's very close knit, and we'll be sharing this information across board, but it's pretty much an opportunity for us to address some of the things that we're seeing that is happening in the ecosystem, and we just want to make sure that we are on top of it. So I have here with me, I'm gonna wait another minute before I start introducing David. But yeah, welcome here and thank you so much.
Thank you. Have you introduced me yet? I think you're. Is that my
No,
network?
I know. Don't worry. I have to wait for movie before I start anything.
Okay.
But I'm gonna wait till 4 or 5. Right now, everything I'm doing is very informal type situation. Okay. Should I just go ahead, David? And then they'll join when they join. David.
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Okay. Hi guys. Welcome. Oh my god. At this point, I'm tired of saying my name and I'm tired of saying my title. My name is Vanessa Junobasi. I am head of communications and growth at University Capital. If you've never heard me say that, welcome. That means you're new to the community. If you have, I'm not sorry about it. I do that with pride. So, but yes, welcome. My name is Vanessa, and I lead the communications team at University Capital. And pretty much what we do is, if you don't know, we're a $10 million VC company, and we pretty much just ensure that we're targeting tech-enabled and tech-led companies in Africa. Aside that, we have an amazing list of portfolio companies, but that's not only things. Those are not the only things that we actually focus on. We should focus on opportunities, creating conversations in the ecosystem, creating environment where people can actually learn and edify themselves. And that's exactly what this masterclass is going to be about today. So David is going to introduce himself, and David is somebody that, since we've connected, I've learned a lot, and not just from him, but even just from associating with him. but I don't want to sound like I'm teaching his on. So I will start with him introducing himself, and then he's going to give us a quick, and then we're going to talk about how we ended up coming up with this entire plan. So David, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Vanessa, for the for the kind words. So I work at Nestcoin. I'm going to do a little bit more of intro later. I work at Nestcoin. Nestcoin is a Web3 startup that creates or builds and invests in crypto products for frontier markets. And so a few weeks ago, there was a very interesting conversation. And please, if you can't hear me properly, just let me know. I'm a little bit unsure of my internet connection and my audio. So if you can't hear me properly,
I can hear David, but David, I think maybe speak up a little bit, but I can hear you. But if you can't hear David, please let us know in the comments. But I think maybe speak up a little bit.
Okay. So a few weeks ago, there was a very interesting conversation on social media about how well the tech media supports the ecosystem. And there were two schools of thoughts. People who thought that there was a cabal of sorts within the tech media, and that the tech media only reports on their friends. And then there was the other group of people, which I belong to, that did not subscribe to that thinking at all. But that entire conversation, that's just to distill the conversation, that entire conversation led to an argument about what really counts as PR, or do all startups need PR? And I wrote an essay about it in my newsletter about how African tech startups can get better PR. And so when I wrote that essay, I put it on, I shared it on LinkedIn, and it didn't go viral, but I got a lot of interesting engagement from it. And I mean, Vanessa and I we've done something before in the past, and we met at a Tech Point event. I was like, you know what, why don't we, make this a thing? Let's do a session about PR for startups, to your portfolio companies and anyone else who might be interested. So that's how come we are where we are right now. And so I'm going to share a few ideas with you, a few of my thoughts with you on how we can, as an ecosystem, get better at PR, because for so many years, this ecosystem treated PR like a lesser good, or something that was not very important, until some years ago when foreign investor attention turned to the ecosystem and money started coming in. And then people realized that getting your startup on TechCrunch is actually a massive signal to investors. But that's just a microcosm of what PR really is, right? Of what PR can do for our startups and what PR can do for our ecosystem. Because as good as the work that we are doing within this ecosystem is, if we don't properly mold the narrative around the work that we are doing, if we don't get people to really understand what we are doing, the importance of what we are doing and the implications of what we are doing, then we are going to be shooting ourselves in the foot. So that's partly the idea behind this session that we're having today. And I'm hoping that by the end of it, you will have learned something really useful and practical for your startup or the company that you work in. And yeah, I'll be open to answering any questions that you have based on the conversation.
Okay, so I think first of all, before we go into the questions, first thing I'm going to say is you have I would say, quick fix templates that you have you want to share with us. Can you just walk us through that first? And then I can also talk about some other questions that should come up, have come up, and might come up. So,
okay, so I think it's best if we start with the presentation. I have a few slides that I put together for this. They will serve as good pointers for where this conversation can go. And so once I'm done sharing those ideas, and there is a case study, I've also added a case study of something that we did recently at Nestcoin to sort of buttress the points and provide a better illustration of the points that I'm trying to make. So when we're done with the presentation, then it will be easier for our listeners or our guests to ask follow-up questions.
Okay, so do you want to just go through the presentation now?
Yeah, I can do that.
All right, lovely.
Share my screen. Okay, yeah, I need permission to share my screen. I can't hear you. You're muted.
You have access now?
Try again. Not yet. I still don't have access. Okay, I think I do that. All right. Can we all see the screen? So as you can see, it's really straightforward. How can tech startups get better PR? And I'm focusing on PR here because of all the elements of communications, I think PR is the most useful to startups. But the problem is that a lot of people do not understand what PR is. But I mean, just before we go on, what's a little bit about me. I'm a writer primarily. I'm a communications strategist and a media analyst. So I currently lead the communications team at Nestcoin. And I've already introduced Nestcoin, and Nestcoin has a media property called Bridge. I'm also the managing editor for that. I publish a media and tech analysis newsletter called Communicate. It goes out twice every month to close to 20,000 subscribers now. I just talk about the media, the intersection of media and tech on the continent. I'm also a contributing editor at the African Tech Roundup. Some of you already know, some of you know about the African Tech Roundup. The African Tech Roundup is primarily a podcasting and insights-driven platform. I used to work at Eco Atlantic City as the head of communications. I've also had editorial positions at Business Insider, Ventures Africa, TechPoint, and TechPower, all the other things that you can see. You can see there. So basically, I'm saying all of that to say that you're in good hands. So let's start with two important questions. What is public relations or PR? Like I said, a lot of people do not really know or understand what PR is. For example, when people approach me to say, hey, I need to do some PR for my startup, I need you to help us with PR for our fund, they often mean they just want to appear on some media platforms. Or sometimes some people inadvertently mean sales. They want me to help them sell something. But those are not the accurate definitions of public relations. And the next question that we're going to answer is, how do you know if your startup is ready for PR? So you know what PR is. How do you know if your startup needs it or if your startup is ready for it? The first question, what is PR, right? So first of all, PR is not marketing, like I've said. You're not going to approach a PR person or a comms person to help you market your startup. They are not the same thing, right? There may be some intersecting elements, but they are not the same. PR is not sales. I'm not selling a product for you. Maybe I'm selling an image, but that's not sales, because with sales, you can measure it's very easy to measure sales. If you're selling, you're either selling numerically or you're not. You're either making a certain amount or a certain number of sales or you're not. So that's not what PR is. And PR is not growth marketing also. Also, PR is not just press releases and media relations. You don't think of PR as, hey, let's write this press release and send it to TechPoint or TechAbba. That's not what PR is. Like it's a lot more than that. So basically, PR is everything that helps you manage how people perceive your startup. So the game of PR is a game of perception. How do people think about your startup? What do they think about your startup? And the classic example I like to use in this ecosystem is, for a very long time, many people thought that Paystack was a bigger company than Flutterwave for a very, very long time. And at the same time, some people still think that they do the same thing, but they don't really do the same thing. And Flutterwave it's bigger than Paystack by a number of factors. But the truth of the matter is, for a very long time, people thought that Paystack was bigger than Flutterwave. And what is the simple reason for that? It's perception. Paystack was in the early days at least, Paystack was very careful about its image, about how people perceived it. And Paystack did not work with traditional PR strategies. Paystack worked with a different kind of storytelling and branding strategy that just set it apart from the ecosystem. So it was really about perception. For a very long time, it was really about perception. And that shows you how important it is, right? How people perceive your startup, what people think about your startup is very, very important. So PR is basically everything that helps you manage and create a good perception of your startup and then manage it properly so that things don't go down the drain quickly. So how do you know if your startup is ready for PR? I think this is a very easy question to answer. As long as you've gotten to a certain stage. Now, not all startups need PR. If you're, for example, you're just in the pre-seed stage or seed stage, you don't really need PR. You should focus on other more important things, right? You should focus on more important things than PR. And I'm going to go deeper into what PR really is. But if you're in the seed stage or maybe pre-seed stage, you've not really gotten things going yet. You've not really kicked it off in the market. Then it's just better sometimes to focus on other things than PR. But once you've gotten to a stage where maybe you're trying to get Series A funding, or maybe, for example, you already have a market, a ready-made market that you know that by doing PR or by doing communications, you're just going to take that market quickly. Then you know that your startup is ready for PR. But sometimes that is not the case. Sometimes that is not the case. Maybe you're just starting out. You're not really sure yet what you are doing. If you're not yet sure what you are doing, you're not 100% sure if there is a product market fit. You don't really know how big the market is or how big the market can be. Then maybe you should just focus on other things. But if you have all those things figured out, then PR is a good option for you. And now, when we say PR, we don't just mean media relations. Media relations is only a part of PR. Now, the articles you see on TechCrunch, that is not the sum total of PR. The articles of the fundraising stories that you see on TechAbout or on Bloomberg, that is not the sum total of PR, right? Those are just little bits or little parts of what PR really is. Now, PR could also be how your founder tweets on social media. Now, if your founder is the type of person who is so, I'm trying to use a nice word, but who is out of control on social media, it's an image disaster for your startup. It's a potential image disaster for your startup. Some people get away with it, maybe because they're very famous and maybe because they're so well loved and they have a lot of goodwill already in the market. So any ridiculous thing that they do online, doesn't really affect the company or the companies that they are associated with. But not everyone is that lucky. In most cases, if a startup founder messes up online, or if a really negative story comes out about a startup and the startup doesn't handle it well, or the founder about a founder and the startup doesn't handle it well, it's going to affect the image of that startup. So really, it's about perception. How do people think? What do people think about your company? Do people like your company? And you know that if people like your company, then they are more likely going to buy from you, especially if your product is really good. And in some cases, if your product is not even the best in the market, people will still buy the product because they have this strong connection, right? So that's what PR does. PR creates a very strong emotional connection between the audience or the customers and the company, so that sometimes you don't even need to talk too much. If someone comes out, let's use Piggyverse as an example. Piggyverse has done this very well, this image building thing very well, that if something comes out negative about Piggyverse on social media, more often than not, you see Piggyverse users caping for Piggyverse, right? They will be, in fact, they will be so ready to go to war and throw hands on behalf of Piggyverse, because Piggyverse has done a very good job of building its image and connecting deeply, creating a strong emotional connection with its users and its audience. So that's really what PR does. What again? I think I've already answered some of these questions. What are some of the benefits of good PR? It's just good PR creates a very strong emotional connection between you and your audience or your market, to the point that sometimes, sometimes if you mess up, sometimes companies mess up, and because they have an overwhelmingly positive image, or people perceive them in a very positive light, it will be easy for them to mop up the mess up. But if people don't already like you, or if people don't even have any, they don't have any emotional connection with you, then they're going to drag you through the mud when something bad happens. And everyone who runs a company knows that at some point, something negative is going to come out about your organization. And if you don't already have a good image, it's going to cause even more damage for you. But if you already have a good image with your, if you already have a good image and you have a strong connection with your users and your audience, it's easier for you to solve the problem, because the chances are that when something bad happens, because you've consistently proven over time that you've consistently built a good image over time, when something bad happens, you already know how to handle that bad thing. That even if you don't handle the bad thing properly, people still feel some kind of way, a good way about you. So those are some of the good benefits. Those are some of the benefits of good PR. Just create a strong emotional connection, so that if you do mess up, or if something goes wrong at some point in your business journey, it's going to be easy for you to clear things up. Also, so what are other benefits of good PR? Even though PR is not marketing, even though PR is not sales, good PR helps sales and marketing. Now, let's use an example. I used to work for an organization that I'm going to be using a lot of real life examples. I used to work for an organization that didn't particularly care about its image, right? It was selling something that was selling a premium property or premium product, and didn't really care if people who could not afford that image or afford that property liked it or not. The organization didn't really care. But what happened over time is this: because the organization didn't care about its image and did not invest in building a good image from scratch, whenever something negative happens, right, it sort of filters into the people who could afford the property. Some of them became afraid to buy the property because of the negative image or the negative association that came with buying that product, because of the negative press or the negative PR that had hit that company. So while PR is not sales, while PR is not marketing, good PR and a good image will help your sales and marketing go a long way. So those are some of the benefits of good PR. So then, how then can you get good PR for your startup? First of all, you need to know what counts as news, right? You need to know what counts as news. You need to understand the news cycle. Then you need to employ social proof, and then you need to build your own media strategy. So let's take these one by one. Now, in the case of PR, in the case of media relations, most people, I won't say everybody because I don't like to generalize, but from my interactions with a lot of startup founders and VCs, everybody wants good press, right? Everybody wants to appear. People like to see themselves on TechCrunch. They like to see their pictures. I mean, I'm sure you see it on social media a lot. When maybe someone gets a feature on on a reputable publication, they will share the article or share screenshots of the article, or if it's print, they will maybe scan a page of the feature and share with their friends. So people like those things, but it's not everything that is news. Not everything is news. So you need to know what counts as news. What is newsworthy? And one way that I personally, and this is also from study, a good way to define news is social benefit. So think of news as a social product, in the sense that news is beneficial not just to you, right? The company that is trying to get into maybe a good media publication or on CNBC. News is something that benefits a lot of people. So you have to think in terms of social benefits. So if you're working at a fintech startup now and you help people save money, the news is not that you help people save money. The news is the impact of the impact of your product, what it does to people. So if, for example, you help people save, you helped Nigerians save 1 billion, or you helped Nigerians transfer 1 billion, that's nice. It's nice, but that's nothing. It's not news. The news is, for example, maybe by saving, using your platform, you're able to help 10 people pay their way through university. Now that's news. That's something interesting. Again, that's just an example, but that's something interesting. So you have to think of news in terms of social benefits. How does it benefit a large group of people? Next, you need to understand the news cycle. What do I mean by this? People pitch stories to journalists without really understanding what the journalist is interested in or what is interesting in the news in that moment. Now, right now, if you have a large fundraising story, you're going to be on TechCrunch anyway. But the time has come in the ecosystem where for every fundraising story, there is a diminishing return. So if you talk to the journalists in TechCrunch, of course, they will tell you that those fundraising stories are nice, but they don't really bring traffic anymore. People retweet. You see a lot of retweet, a lot of engagement, but they don't really bring traffic anymore. So now the news cycle is shifting from this emphasis on how much this company has raised to this emphasis on what that means for the ecosystem. Take the story of Flutterwave, for example. Flutterwave raised 250 million at a 3 billion valuation. The real news story is what it now meant for the ecosystem. Not necessarily that Flutterwave raised 250 million. Like, everybody is raising money now. It's no longer news if you raise money. But what does that raise mean for the ecosystem? So you need to understand how the news cycle is shifting for you to be able to pitch your stories properly. Now, moving away from press stories and press relations, let's talk about social proof. Now, this is why people use influencers. Social proof is why people use influencers. What are people saying about your startup? That's good PR. So if you're very deliberate about what people are saying about your startup, then that's a good way to maximize PR or your image, right? So it matters when a lot of people are talking about your startup. That's number one. That's the first part of social proof, the number of people who are talking about your startup. And number two is what they are saying about your startup. So that is social proof. And how do you do that? You simply do that by making sure that your products work properly. If your products work properly, if you understand the market very well, then you have a lot of social proof, because people are going to come online and talk about your product. They're going to say, hey, I use this product and it's really amazing. It's really nice. Or I use this product and it really sucked. It's really terrible. If like 10,000 people are saying that your product sucks, that's bad PR for you. That means you need to pay attention to what they're saying instead of trying to defend yourself. So you need to understand social proof and employ it. The last part of this is build your own media strategy. What do I mean by this? Now, in the past, for you to build an image, you needed to go through third parties, through the press. Now you don't need to do that. Now you can build your own media properties with a blog and with YouTube videos. A lot of companies are doing this. A lot of companies, instead of hiring traditional comms people, they are hiring managing editors, and they are running their comms as if it's a media publication, as if it's an actual newsroom. In fact, you hear some companies referring to their comms teams as newsrooms, right? So, and what that does is, instead of depending on third parties to tell your story for you, you can now decide what you want to tell people about yourself. And if you do it well enough, you're very authentic about it, you're savvy with it, you're wise about it, you're going to gain a lot of customers and a lot of fans. Now, all of these things that we've talked about in theory, let's look at a case study that puts them in practice. Now, let's use Nestcoin now as a case study. We first of all, we have our own media property, which is Bridge, and we're investing in something that's called Rekere. Rekere is basically a way of making crypto mainstream in partnership with creators. So we realized that for us to make crypto, or this new technology that we think is going to change the world, for us to make it more widely adopted, we need to be able to engage with people on the most basic level. We need to be able to engage with people on the most basic level. And so the first step to doing that is having our own media property, which is Bridge. And by going through Bridge, by building out Bridge and Rekere, we're able to get through to the people who would typically depend on TechAbal for crypto or Web3 content. Now, they don't have to depend only on TechAbal or other platforms or other tech platforms for Web3 or crypto content. We can now reach them directly. So that's number one. Number two, was last month. Sorry, this month has been so long. At the beginning of this month, we wanted to announce our pre-seed raise. It's one of the largest pre-seed raises on the continent, but that was not the focus of our story. To make sure that we got maximum coverage in the press, we first of all had to pitch the story as from a human interest perspective. So, for example, we see that we use the example of MVM. MVM is trying to get people into crypto gaming, and by getting people into crypto gaming, things that they would normally have done as a hobby in the past, they can now make money from it. And so you see an MVM gamer, for example, who started with almost nothing, now earning in thousands. Right? So that's human interest. That's one way to get your story into the press and to get people to care about your story. Another angle is what crypto is going to do for people in frontier markets. Right? That's another angle. Social benefit again. Another thing is, I mentioned social proof. Instead of us trying to break the story alone ourselves, we looked at our list of investors and we said, okay, we have some pretty interesting people who are of social interest on this list. For example, we have Serena Ventures, we have Alameda Capital, we have Goat VC, we have all these really top high-level venture capital companies that, by mentioning them, it brings us social capital, and it helps tell our story to people who would normally not listen or care. So that's how we were able to employ social proof to tell our story. So these are some of the things that we have done at Nestcoin, for example, to put together a coherent narrative about ourselves and to make sure that our story is not at the mercy of someone else or a third party, that we are telling it ourselves. We own our narrative, and by owning our narrative, we're able to tell our story properly and get people to connect with us deeply, so that everything we do has impact on to a very, very large extent. So yeah, that's it. Any questions?
Okay, so I'm gonna go first, and so mine is more. It's not question to say. It's more. We need to go through like the intricacies of. First of all, there's some things that you said that I was like, I think we need to like address those things, because it's that thought process. That prevents people from always knowing, oh, should I pay attention to this more? Should I not pay attention to this more? So, example would be when businesses come together. So from pre-seed all the way, and then like they said, okay, you know what, we're hiring for only tech roles, and that's where competition ends. Only tech roles. And then we go into like seed and then series, and then it's like there's one point now say, okay, you know what? Let me just find somebody in, and I like that you were able to like say distinctively, marketing, communications, PR, content marketing or content, social media, they're not the same role.
Yes,
all
they're not.
different.
They are not the same.
Growth marketing,
they're different.
Media buying. No,
different.
They are all different roles. There can be an umbrella.
Yes, I was going to say that.
Yeah, but they are not the same role. The person that comes in as a content strategist for you is not their job to be your communications marketer or communications person or specialist, because it's also the titling that just confuses everything. Your content strategist, your marketing manager's job is not the same as your growth manager's job. They're two different things. Yes. So no, I would say when you come in, and this is what I'm going to address is, when you come in and you're titling content and community manager, you do know that those two roles are two different roles that you find. So you have to be able to understand that they're playing two different roles and two different responsibilities. And those two things can come up very, very tedious.
Yes, true.
So, because in some people's offices, that's their job. And in that part, there's the part where you also throw them into project manager and program manager at the same time. So my point is to ensure that all of these roles, even if you want to lump sum them, you also have to understand that you have to give this one, the tools to make everything work.
Yes.
Two, the understanding that their responsibility is tedious. Yeah. Three, the fact that they also have teams that can oversee certain things. So you can't have a content and communications manager, community manager, and not have a content writer on the team.
Sure.
Now, looking at these words we're saying might sound very interesting, but it's when you're actually trying. That's why I think David had mentioned that. I don't want to go into PR. That's a different conversation. But what David was saying, you guys, we have PR and all of these things and not all of these things, but you have to know where to remove and pick and choose and all, But the thing is, we also understand that, and also when he said not everybody should be able to hire for those roles, because in all honesty, those roles can be, it's literally the more you're scaling, the more you're having those specific roles. I would say, go on.
Okay, so I think what I would advise is for companies that are just starting out, it's better to focus on building your own internal engine. And by internal engine, I mean content. That's one thing I know that Paystack got right from the beginning. Their growth was content, well, part of it was content driven. That's why, in the beginning, Paystack hired Mohini from Andela. as a media manager. No one was doing that at the time. This was years ago. No one was doing that at the time, right? Because they knew that, or they thought that if we focus on this thing and we do it very well, it's going to win us a lot of goodwill to the point that we don't really have to spend on traditional PR or non-traditional PR in the future. So if you are just starting out, I think it's just better to focus on building your own internal engine, which is content. And like Vanessa said, content strategist and content writer are not the same thing. It's possible that one person can do both. It's possible, but they are not the same thing. So it's really important to outline the roles, right? And expectations for each role. So that if you're hiring someone to be a content strategist, you're not telling them to come and do, it's not, do you understand? It's not good. You need to get a writer because—
and do social media.
Exactly.
Or come and do writing articles for SEO. Yeah.
Because, I mean, let's think of it in terms of comms, for example. I'm a comms strategist. That means is it right brain? The right brain is the analytical one, right? My right brain is far more functional than my left brain. I'm not the most creative comms person. I'm not good at copyright. I'm good at feature writing. I'm not good at copywriting. So if you hired me, for example, to come and run comms for you or content for you, and you told me to be your content writer, I'll probably suck at it because I'm better at content at strategy, thinking about overarching strategies. So you as a person, as a startup founder, you need to understand the dynamics of each role and what you're hiring for, and then hire with the full and complete understanding of what it is that you're getting your people into.
I think another part to it is, as if you currently work in any of the roles that we've talked about, and you feel some type of way, like maybe your boss doesn't listen or understand or hasn't paid attention to like any of the things you said, it's always very interesting to highlight your skills. So when you sit in a room with your boss or your HR, and they ask you, oh, what do you think your strong suit is? Don't say everything. It's not everything. And just like David just said, the roles are very specific for a reason, because they can all be modeled up. You know, head of marketing, marketing manager, marketing executive, the entire shebang. There's a long list of it. Or communications manager, head of communications, head of content writing, head of content marketing. There's a long list. However, if you want to ensure that you as a person is growing, one, two, you're not dealing with the reality that you might be lagging in the roles that you're doing, you should ensure that everything you are choosing to take on, if you are good at writing, there was a time that I literally could not I was, going to like a bunch of magazines. Like, oh, I'm really great at like strategizing, ideation, all of those things. And the more I did that, the less and less I cared about like, oh, actually writing. And for that reason, or since then, it's been more like that's my functional understanding for like, my role and my job. I can also see things through like in terms of what is the bigger picture for these things. If your focus is like, oh, I want to do like feature writing and like understanding certain things, or you pick and choose, or you're nitpicky, and or you can actually see something I think we can easily do that's cheaper. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, I think your network is choppy.
That's being funny, Abby.
Yeah. Do we have any questions from?
Okay, so if you're very like nitpicky, one of those people that have attention to detail, there are certain roles that They're set up. Yes, please, if you have questions, sorry, you can easily raise your hand, like Ibuku is currently doing. So we don't have to write a lot of questions. So just raise your hand and we'll take all your questions. But if you're nitpicking and all of these things, and you know that those are things that it's like you have attention to detail, can be very anal. That's also a very great skill. And if you relegate it into different parts, there are parts to it that it comes up very, very handy. If it's writing articles, if it's documenting, if it's video editing, you don't have to be a videographer or a social media designer to be able to know how to use Instagram Reels, things like that. But the thing is, there's so many different roles to like communications, and I think that one of the things to take back, really, to if you work in a startup or you are looking to work in a startup, you should ensure that you have all of these things put in place so it doesn't like undermine you or underwhelm you. One of the things that I'll also say is, if you're looking to do this in startups, never feel like because everybody is tech driven or tech related or tech focused, your job is not relevant. Because in all honesty, you're not really going to always keep getting, oh, well done, oh, amazing, because how tech has now been curated is the focus is mostly on tech and tech related conversations, as opposed to that's really the focus. I mean, I don't think they do it intentionally. I just think that they just make you feel comfortable to say like don't understand that there are other parts to it, and because those other parts to it are not what is in your forefront, that's not what you're constantly thinking about. So never feel undermined. Don't feel like, oh, you're not doing your job, you're not doing well. I think that the ways that you can always make yourself stand out is always document, always toot your horn, always reiterate, oh, this is success for X, Y, and Z. If you run a campaign, post-evaluation report is always great. Post-evaluation report is always great. So they see, oh, this was what we did. This was the result. Just making them see the things that you did, because they don't know that is so many social media posts, so many SEO articles that you wrote, so many, they don't know that those are the things that are influencing things like maybe your clicks, your deal flow, your downloads, depending on the department or the industry you're working in. So just don't feel that type of way. So yeah, I want to take questions. Should we go ahead, David?
Yes.
Okay, so
I think I can get to the questions. My Wi-Fi is about to die.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Hi, Ibuku.
Hi, David. Thank you for this session.
Thank you.
My question is, must you always have a social benefit angle for every news you want to share?
I mean, so my typical response to questions like that is, you don't have to do anything, to be honest. You don't always have to do things a certain way, but there is the way the world works, or there is the way things work. And if you optimize for that particular way, you're more likely to get results than you want. So if you take your story from a social benefit angle, I mean, there are stories that are on TechCrunch or on any platform, for that matter, that are nice. But the stories that people will always remember, I'll use a very good example. Njoku of LaserPay just had a story on Tech About. And anyone who reads that story is going to remember that his father basically succeeded despite lack of support early in his coding career. So that's what I mean. So you don't always have to do it, but once you bring that social human interest element to it, because one of the first things that they teach us in journalism school is that the best news stories always have the human interest angle or the social benefit angle. That's what they teach us in journalism school. And so if you take from that playbook and you apply it to your PR and your storytelling, you're going to have the same results. So you don't have to always go from a social benefit or human interest perspective, but you have your story or your startup will have more impact if you go from that angle. So that's my answer to you. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Peter Paul was raising his hand.
Peter can. Oh, right. Yeah, he can.
Okay.
Hi, Peter.
If you're speaking, I can't hear you.
Yeah, we can.
I work in music.
Oh my goodness, I can't hear you very well.
Okay, can you just send it as a text so that we can read it out?
Yeah,
because we can't hear you.
Do we have any other
Does anyone else have
questions?
a question? I think there's one more. Yeah, one more question, and maybe have to go. Yeah. But yeah, like, let's just wait for him to type his question. I don't think we can hear him.
Okay.
But other than that, I think, yeah. Oh, this was really great. I really, really appreciate it. And I think it's a conversation that we're going to keep coming back to.
Yeah, I think so too.
We just need to keep like reiterating what we're saying, and with everything happens in the ecosystem, it's like there's a new like pie you need to go through. So yeah, then Peter, can you try again just so that we can know that this is okay? David, you have people that are joining now. I wonder what's okay. At least we'll record this, and we are recording this, and then we'll share it with
Okay.
afterward.
Has Peter tried again?
No, I haven't seen it. Maybe he left and oh no, he's still here. Peter, have you tried again so that we can wrap this up? That's waiting for you. Waiting. Yeah, I think to wrap this up, he's not.
No. Okay, please type your question.
Just type your question. To wrap this up, I think the last question I was gonna ask is, oh yeah, we can hear. I think I can. Yeah, I think so. Okay.
Muted again.
Okay. Yeah. So my last question is going to be, and I think this is in like focusing on like, do you think the reason like communications, PR, like those type of roles are a bit interesting? So if you remember when we were in uni, and I don't know because I think you went to, that's what you studied in school, right?
Yeah, I studied communication.
Yes. So do you think that, you see how they made it look like it was only science students that were serious?
Yeah.
Remember how it felt?
I think I know where your question is going. the perception of communication as an industry.
So do you think that perception has grown into businesses, which is why like this ends up always becoming a conversation that people need to have? And if you don't feel, and some people actually feel, especially when it comes to founders and owners of businesses, think about it like, well, we have to hire the serious roles first. Do you think that that's part of the reason? Just ingrained in their mind?
I have to think about that.
Oh, he sent this question. While you're thinking about it and think about it,
yes, I've seen it.
So he said, okay, you sent it. Oh, do you want to answer that?
I will. So I don't think it's a thing of school. I think it's a classic example of an industry trying to help other industries, but failing to help itself. And what I mean is, and this is one of the reasons I started my newsletter. For an industry that tells other people's stories, PR is bad at telling its own stories and building its own perception. So that's really what we are seeing. I don't think it's a result of, because if you think about it, marketing is a very valued department. Sales is very valued. I think the problem is, first of all, PR has a PR problem, as interesting as that is. And second, because you cannot directly trace the times, that affects how founders, who are often driven by hard numbers, that affects how they perceive
David, did you go off?
PR or
I can't
comms
hear you again.
department. So
Okay.
end of the world. But I think it's from school. Turn into the tech. Oh my goodness. I get this question a lot. Maybe.
Okay, David, I don't think we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
No, not really. But let's just
How about
answer. Oh, I can hear you now.
Okay, so I was saying, Peter's question. I don't know. I never know how to answer this question because
I can actually I can give him.
Okay, please, please help out because I never know how to answer it.
So we I don't know how to answer this. So basically, you just have to find opportunities that would align you to what you want to do in PR or in tech, sorry. So for instance, when I started working in fashion as an online, but the thing is I was writing about the things that was interesting to me. And then currently on the team, we have a bunch of people actually that did not start currently in the roles that they're in VC, but they've either transitioned from like law to analyst or PR actually to analyst. So these are also like opportunities. The only thing is you just need to remember that everything you're trying to do is a role. It's a job opportunity on a job role. So for instance, what it requires you to do in marketing is you're supposed to source, you're supposed to communication is you have to be a good writer. It doesn't matter the topic that they give you, you can write any topic. You're great at writing topics. You're great at ensuring that you have good like communication skills, you have interpersonal skills. So those are the things that will build you to like who you now want to transition in. Whether you work in tech, in music, in fashion, if you don't have the basic skills of a PR person, you cannot transition anywhere. So it's pretty much you just knowing like those like very significant skills. Now build on them and see how can that now transition into the startup that you want to work in, or like the tech company that you want to work in. And then when you find that, marriage between both of them, which is your skill and the how you can actually help them, that's how you can transition. It doesn't matter whether you are working in fashion before or in music before, and then you now decided you wanted to move. If you actually don't have the actual required skill, you can't do it. And when I say skill, you need to know how does this transition into, if I want to start working right now in Paystack and they said they need me to write an article on a particular product. If I do research, can I put it together? Just ask yourself that question. If they said they need to do social media, and I know that I was doing social media for a website before, for music before, but now I don't do social media, but with tech products. How can I find a way to make that balance? And one of the things I find very interesting is when you come from that other side, there is an interesting open-mindedness that you get, that you can see like transitioning and like progress that you've never thought about before. But then you can see how you can now decide, like you're working in travel, let's say for instance, and you now start working from travel into apps. Then now you can actually find a way to like make everything look curated in a very intentional and solidified manner, as opposed to your doggedness when you are working, if you're coming from apps into travel. I don't know if that makes sense for you. David, what do you think?
So I think it's good advice, especially the part about writing. For me, every time I've had to talk to someone about anyone who wants to transition into communications, I tell them the biggest thing you can do for yourself is be a really good writer. Like, be so good at writing. If you're really good at writing, then it's easier for you to sell ideas. And when I say writing, I mean, you know how to make people enjoy things. So I think that's one of the biggest things that has worked for me personally in my career. No matter how complex or abstract something is, if you give me a topic to write about and you give me enough time, I would take that very boring topic and I will spin something really interesting out of it. And I think that's the foundation of all good PR people, or all great PR people. They're just really good writers. And then the next thing is, how well can you think of stories or perspectives or angles? Because people talk about PR, they talk about the hard skills. But I think the thing that really makes good PR people is the background work that people don't see. That's thinking. How smart are you? How well can you can look at something and, okay, instead of going in this direction, you know what, let's look at it from this direction, and then let's tell the story from this direction, or let's emphasize this particular angle. And that angle that you point out for people to emphasize is the one that will drive home the point the most. And in that process, you will have done your work very well. So to answer Peter's question, how can you transition from music into PR? Once you have the basic skills, and the good thing with PR is the skills are very transferable, right? I mean, look at me. I went from being a journalist to being a real estate PR person, and then I'm back in tech. Do you understand? The skills are transferable. The same skills that you use as a PR person in music will be the same skills that you use as a PR person in tech. But you now have to do the hard work of understanding the ecosystem or the industry that you want to get into. Now you start to rub shoulders with the people in that industry. You start to get people to see, if, for example, a good way to think about this is maybe Spotify, right? Spotify is straddling tech and music. How can you take advantage of that kind of knowledge? YouTube Music is tech and music. Do you understand? So you now have to, I mean, I can't think of everything right now, but you now have to figure out what kind of knowledge do you need to have access to? What kind of people do you need to know? Do you need to have a relationship with? So that if you now want to take those skills that are very relevant or useful to you as a music PR person into tech, you can make that transition because you know what you need to know. You know the people that you need to know. I hope that helps, Peter.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys. Thank you so much, everyone. We'll be sharing this recording anyway. However, this is one of those things that we'll continue to talk about. And thank you so much, David, for being here and being a part of this.
Thank you.
Appreciate it so much. I hope everyone has a good evening. Hopefully you're all in Nigeria. But yeah, thanks, David.
All right, thank you, Vanessa.
All right.